Here's another thing that's really interesting. We have an emporium in our school where kids can take the alpha currency that they earn for hitting their goals and they can buy stuff. It might be a Lego set or stickers or snacks or you name it. The number one most popular item in the emporium is a special lunch with their guide. Kids love that connection and that mentorship. And then the other part of kind of coming in as a middle school student or a high school student, we are really serious about creating a culture where we are helping students understand that they can be creators and contributors, not consumers. And when you think about what society does, it naturally pushes kids into the consumer mode. Scroll TikTok all day, watch YouTube, play video games endlessly.
Yeah,
and
passive in
instead,
life.
we spend time helping our kids see, one, what are their values? What are their talents? What are they interested in? They go through an Ikigai values workshop that they then do a workshop where they spend 168 hours of their week tracking, right? How do they spend that time? And what are they actually doing with it? And pretty soon, our guides are working with kids to realize, you know what? Instead of playing a video game, why don't you go learn to vibe code and build a video game and then host your own tournament? Instead of scrolling TikTok, build an audience that's promoting a message with a great, app that you've built. And we find young people want to step into that role, and we just need to help make that possible.
I love that.
And as a result, we see
purpose first.
Yeah, we see, and when you have that sense of purpose and that culture and students who are uplifting each other, we really have found that's been a pretty good cocktail for healthy lives.
Well, one of the things we see a lot is when you try anything disruptive in a legacy environment, the immune system attacks you. So are you getting attacked by the legacy system?
Well, this is one of I've been trying to figure out, can you convert an existing school, or do you have to be a new school like Alpha? And the answer is, I've talked to, the heads of some of the, top 10 private schools in the country. And I'm like, here's the difference. If you hear this pitch and you like it, you come to the Alpha Info Session, which is why there's 1,000 people at New York's Alpha Info Session, because, people want this new thing. All the people who don't like this message stay at your school. And so, there is for sure a set of people who are like, I don't want that. And it's twofold of what it is. There's a set of people who are like, I want it, but somebody else has to be first. That everybody wants to come to an Alpha. And as we open up all these new cities, right, one of the things you realize is once Alpha has 100 people, right, then everybody wants to come. Nobody wants to be the first 20.
Let's talk about that.
That's fine. That's the key.
Let's talk about how you get your schools open. So you're opening one in Santa Monica. You've just opened one in Santa Barbara. So your typical, you go out and you find a real estate location. You're finding some place that has enough interest that you've assessed. So you have a density. And then, Mackenzie, you're looking at an opening class of 25 to 40 typically?
Yeah, in general, we're calling these kind of micro schools with about 25 students is the start.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the things you mentioned to me is one of the advantages if you're like a founding family is, and I love this idea, is that you can actually help create the opening class, right? You can get your kids' best friends in there and you can select. I mean, I think half of education is who you go through the educational process with, right? Are they people holding you up or pulling you down?
And I think this is a good one, and I'll tell this is the Mackenzie story, which is, when she was co-founding Alpha, she woke up and said, I want to go find the 20 people who are going to surround my kids, right? And I was actually, unfortunately, I was a laggard. It took Mackenzie 2 years to convince me to come to Alpha because I was like all the other parents. My kids, I went to Catholic school, didn't really like it, almost expelled because I skipped school all the time, dropped out of college, but my kids are going to Catholic school.
You've done pretty well, Joe. So.
Sure. But my kids were going to Catholic school and I was like, this is such a weird school, like so weird. Right. And, but she woke up and is what we would now call a founding family, right? She founded Alpha, but in every city, you need the same thing because Just because Austin's going well doesn't mean Santa Monica or Santa Barbara or San Francisco or New York. They want to be like, this one is it. And so
Is
the
it-
core of growth is going to a city and finding those first set of families who are like, yes, I'm in, and I'm actually going to go recruit the other families, because it is it is one where parents want to see, okay, it's working for your kid, okay, I trust it, right? That we if I always say the two things parents need to move a kid from their school is they need a reference from an adult they trust, a parent they trust in their city,
Yep.
and they need to see a kid at the school do something their kid can't do, whether it's love of school or academics or life skills, whatever they care about. They have to see those two things, and when they have the two things, then they'll move.
Do you use
you
a
also have to
franchise model,
comply with
or
a
do you
whole bunch
own
of-
all your own schools?
So for Alpha, it's 100% us. We run it. There's no franchise. We're 100% in charge of the quality control. But
Yeah.
but the second part of it is Alpha's the high-end private school. We designed this when we said, what are we doing? It's price is no object, right? It's expensive. It's the high-end private school. How would you rebuild education? Now, with this time back platform that we're building a whole set of other schools based on it, which will be different models. So we've launched Texas Sports Academy, right? Which is the afternoon is all sports. We've launched Gifted Talented School, which is for the kids who love academics. When you say, what would make you love more school? They're like, more academics. And so, those kids are learning like 5X learning. Like they'll be 1,500 by, 8th grade. And so you have different ones. We have a wilderness school, right? So we have a Montessori school. So you can imagine all these different models that as soon as you have this magic of 2-hour learning, you can start to say, what should we do in the afternoon? And so next year in 2026, you're going to see all these other models beyond just Alpha that roll out based on this time back software.
How
And
big
what's
is your
been
vision,
the
Joe?
reaction of the authorities and government departments of education and that whole legacy side?
Yeah, your public school, I'm going to be doing this for 20 years. McKinsey's in for 20 years. The public school side, I think, is going to be like the second decade, not the first decade, which is we're doing a lot. It's all private, right? It's there's a whole set of schools. The Texas Sports Academy is using the Texas vouchers, the $1 billion they just allocated, where it's $300 a month parent pay. So, bringing the price way down from an Alpha. And so right now, this is a private model. And we've tried on the public side. McKinsey applied for 10 charters in 10 states for in-person charters. 0. Rejected
Got
10
one,
times.
One. We got Arizona.
One virtual, but you got a virtual, not a physical, which is physical school. The school boards literally say things like, I was put on this earth to stop people like you.
Wow.
And so
That's
you're not,
that's what I talk about when I say the immune system. The
quite a lot.
legacy
Yeah, for
likes, yeah.
for sure. And so for us, it's, back to the thing. The private school market's a $50 billion market, right? And so it's a big market. And for those parents who want to opt in, it is radical, so they can. We'd love to move into public as soon as they want to invite us. But, on charters, we just said, we know we're not wanted here. So whenever you want us, come call us. But otherwise, we're done applying for, charters.
And I think, Salim, what we see is we've got a lot of interest from the public education sector. The Secretary of Education came and spent the day at Alpha in Texas in September. We get people who kind of are inspired, but it's really the idea of, can you really change the whole model of the day, right? If academics only takes 2 hours, what do you do with the rest of the school day? And are you willing to change that role of teachers and all that? So I think right now, part of the reason we get a lot of attention, we are probably the most talked about school, in the world, is because we are sort of serving as inspirational ideas for what's possible. And I actually love that part of it. I'm getting parents who reach out to me who have implemented a lot of what we do in their homeschool environments, or taking pieces of that. And I think, eventually it'll get there. But right now, our plan is to build the private distribution model at varying levels and price points, still delivering the academic excellence through the Time Back platform and the life skills development. And that just can be done in different ways. At Alpha, our students will learn adaptability and teamwork by doing a sailing workshop where they eventually sail from Florida to the Bahamas, over 5 days. But you know what else you can do? You can get incredible life skills development by letting kids get out on the sports field, starting at noon instead of at 4 o'clock, and giving them time back to do
guys,
things. So there's
is
lots
everything
to do.
perfect? What do you guys worry about? What keeps you up at night? What are the problems that are having? I mean,
I
don't want to be I listen.
No,
I
no,
love what you're
totally.
doing. I just understand what's the flip side of the
Lots.
equation here.
Well, flip side is your average parent, when hearing this, think this is totally wacky and must not be true. So, educating parents that this new model is not fake and false and a hoax and all of that, is a huge lift, right? Our marketing department is, our schools educate kids. We have to go educate parents because every parent literally thinks the opposite. That's one. The part I, as principal, is how do I scale with keeping quality? Right. So every time we open a new location, every time we have a new guide, how are we making sure that you're getting that same level of love of school, right? Academic performance, the life skills. We spend a lot of time, like when you talk about life skills, we teach grit. What does that mean? Right? If you can't just read a book, Angela's book, and be like, oh, my kid has grit, right? We have to be able to say our third graders in Santa Monica and Austin and New York have grit. What does that mean? What's the test to pass, right? What is our, alpha cert, right, that we have? And so we spend a lot of time making sure that we're building this for scale, right? And making sure that, every third grader can do a Rubik's Cube. So we're like, that's a good, proxy for grit. And so the scaling part is, critical. The other is our cost, right? I'm burning 10 grand on the AI. I got to drive that down. So tomorrow, if somebody flipped a switch and said, okay, finally every parent wants it tomorrow, we couldn't fulfill it. We got to drive that curve down to make that work. And then the biggest one that I think to hit scale, building schools and rebuilding from scratch is, I got 20 years, so we're going to build 10,000 schools, and that's going to be great. And I love it. But how do I get to 1 billion kids, right? How do we drive this out to 1 billion kids? And if motivation is your number one issue, right? This engine part's easy in the scheme of things. How do you motivate kids when you don't own the school day, right? The biggest motivator of a kid is giving their time back. So if I have 6 and I give you 4 hours back, I have the most important motivation. But for the 1 billion kids where I don't control their school day, right? And they're not going to give it back to me. They're not going to restructure their school. We still have to get to those kids and we have to motivate them to do it. And so you're going to see where we're partnering with some of the best motivators in the world to figure out how do we package up both a motivational component with the learning component. So we have some of the world's best video game designers that's going to be released in 2026. We work with some of these biggest influencers, right? And packaging all this up where it's a bundle, motivation plus the learning. And that is hard. There's a big lift there, right? So that's a big issue.
Have you talked to other governments? Because there's certainly countries around the world that are much more open to the future of education in a modern way than we are, say, here.
Yes, we do. We have demand everywhere. And, on governments, what we find is it's the same thing almost everywhere, which is if countries have a private model, you absolutely can get take rate on the private side. The issue is ministers of education or secretaries or departments of education are pretty much globally very much going to wait and see until there's dramatically more proof, which I'm not against. I was, Peter Attia was his daughter went to the school, and I was comparing, medical grade testing, versus education. And, there aren't, in education, we roll stuff out to 55 million kids, and there's no randomized controlled trial, right? There's no million user, like, does this really work? Mm-hmm. And I would love, one of the things that we'd love to do is be able to, as we get all this data out there and this, time back at scale, is do a 1 million student randomized controlled trial so that every pharmaceutical grade trial, everybody can be like, this isn't a hoax, right? This actually works. Oh my gosh, right? We need some of that proof, because a lot of things in education are, there's a lot of bad learning science in education that we need to undo. And I believe proof and pharmaceutical grade trials might be the way around that.
Incredible. As we close on this episode, I have one final question, but Dave and Salim, I want to give you a chance to ask yours.
I would love to know how you deal with the rate of change of technology and what your process is. Because if you think about, if you start with a batch of, say, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and you're planning that to end as 18-year-olds, but in the intervening 12 years, half the kids will have neural links, and the other half won't, and they'll be doing something in the back of their mind you can't even see. Like, how are you going to deal with this constant rate of change during that timeline?
Yeah. So that we're humble enough to know we don't have all the answers. McKinsey and I talked to thousands of kindergarten parents, right? And the kindergarten parents are the ones who want the biggest change, because they are looking out at 12 years from now, and they all know this current school system is not going to work, right? We need something different, right? They're motivated to change, versus if you have a senior in high school, you're like, let me just get him to college or get him out of here, right? But if you have to look forward and project 12 years, you're going to want something new. And all we say at Alpha is we wake up every day and we feel we're the leading school that is saying, how do we adapt to what the technology changes? So if you actually look at our high school kids, we have a concept called a brain lift, which is the data structure for human knowledge, right? And it literally divides. This is the stuff LLMs are going to be good at, or are good at, and will be. And this is the part that humans are good at. And we're teaching them as of today, and with, what we can project in the future, this is as good as we can get, kids. And this is how we're preparing you for that world. And, and maybe Grok 7 is like, okay, well, it does everything the brain lift thought is, and we got to move on. But we believe there's our view very much, and I think this is an important point about our culture. McKinsey's best line is, this is the best time in history to be a 5-year-old, right? AI is going to impact adults very differently. We're in Austin, Ubers, Waymos, robo-taxis, right? Not a good time to be an Uber driver, right? But AI gives kids superpowers, right? It's going to transform their childhood. It's going to let them do things that our generation never even dreamed of. And so putting your kid in that kind of environment, right, is going to be awesome for them. And, if you talk to, I have a dozen high school kids who are in my guide group. Sparta Group, shout out. Anyway, they, they wake up every day, and when you talk to them, they're like, yeah, you adults, man, it's wraps for you guys. AI is going to give us superpowers, and we're going to take over the world.
Well, infinite
Right.
longevity too. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, I mean, they can't be more optimistic about the future. And I think that's the kind of thing.
By the way,
They better get moving before us adults screw it up completely.
let me hit
They
hit
are.
on that.
Don't worry, they are.
Don't worry, they are.
One of the reasons we moved schools for our kids at one point was you have to assess the level of optimism of the teachers teaching your kids.
Mm-hmm.
If your teachers are pessimistic about the future, what do you expect your kids to be?
I couldn't agree. Matt Ridley, right?
Yeah.
All our kids read Rational Optimist, right?
Well, they have to
Matt
read.
Ridley
They have to
came
read
the
abundance.
school.
They have to read abundance as well. Okay.
Yeah. And they, he came to the school, and he actually was sort of an AI doomer when it came to education. And I couldn't have been more proud as our students sat there and used his arguments from his books and examples from what their day is like on why he needs to see the world differently. That this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's an important part of when you talk about culture that we need for our kids.
And
Amazing.
Peter, we had a big foundation, a very large education philanthropy foundation came and visited our schools. And at the end of the time, the head of the foundation said to my guides and me, they said, "You guys are so happy." And I was kind of like, what, and they said, we go and we visit schools and we talk to educators, and they're all just so, they're encumbered and they're depressed and they're like, it's so hard. And I was so happy to see my guide said, what do you mean? This is the greatest time in the world to be an educator, because we finally are unleashed to do what we got into this world to do, which is positively impact kids. And you can do those things. And the other thing I love and appreciate, and I think Joe is obviously a really great partner to have in this education endeavor. But one of the things I say is, if you come to one of our schools, at the beginning of the school year, we're not going to just dust off the same old presentation that says, hey, here's what the school year looks like. This is the date of field day. This is the day for back to school night, whatever. We're more like the Apple iPhone. We update every 6 weeks. We're constantly iterating, and we're constantly growing and learning, and we're seeing what works and what doesn't. And I will say, families in our model, they have to flex their adaptability muscle as well, because we're always having kids do cool things and adjusting things as they work. And I think that's why we're able to see such rapid innovation. But as part of that, we are on the forefront of it. So it's kind of a fun and wild ride, which hopefully, Peter, you guys will get to be a part of, in Santa Monica, is seeing what that's like.
Amazing. Hopefully
it's
your
very
AI
clear-
works. Hopefully your AI works better than the Apple iPhone AI. Salim, why don't you wrap us up here, buddy?
Yeah, I think that's what's great is it's such a clear watershed between everything you're doing in a growth mindset and everything old in a fixed mindset. And I think you're probably pushing people over that line wonderfully. If you launched, I think 2016, if I remember right?
We started the very first school in 2014 when my kids were in 3rd and 1st grade, and
Okay.
Joe's daughters, who are the same age as my girls, came in a couple years later, and we now have sophomores in college and then seniors in high school. So this is Joe's and my last year as alpha parents, and then he'll be pure principal and guide leader, and I'll do whatever I do.
If you go back to your founding, what would you have done differently that would have accelerated or changed things? What have you learned now that you wish you knew then?
Oh boy.
To partner with Joe at the very beginning, I guess, right?
Well, part of it's not like, part of this, and back to the story 3 years ago, why I got involved was, I put my kids in 10 years ago, but I was like, McKinsey, just like all education, this isn't scalable. This is great for Austin. It's great for our families. It wasn't until Gen AI came out when I said, this is the technology that can let us scale to 1 billion kids. So it really was that moment that said, okay, now I should get involved because we can get it out to everybody, and what I bring to the party. And so, that would have been it. And if you just rolled me back 3 years, what would I have done differently? The understanding, the educating parents. I wake up every day, and if I could wave a magic wand to fix education, it's actually not the students. The students are awesome, right? The issue
the
is
parents.
because parents are the blocker. The blocker to education reform is what's in parents' heads. And so that whole concept of,
Inertia.
for 3 years, I didn't do a podcast, right?
Yeah.
And I did, and now I realize educating parents, McKinsey's been out there. We have to get out there because the single biggest impediment to making education great for our kids is what our parents believe.
Amen. McKinsey, where can we point people to learn more about Alpha School? Where do they go to?
Well, we've got Alpha schools that are launching coast to coast. We had 13 new schools this year, and we'll be continuing to announce. So you can go to alpha.school and learn more about our model. And then Future of Education on social media, on Instagram. I've got a podcast called Future of Education. And we spend a lot of time on those channels just giving parents a little bit of a taste of what's possible in school when you free kids time up to go do awesome things and develop. So Future of Education and alpha.school.
And Joe, any particular targets you want to point folks at?
Oh, he's becoming an X star.
Good. Good.
You can get Jay Limon is where I post, and you'll see sort of life as a principle, what all the education and the business. You'll see some stuff about the business of education, as well as what Alpha kids are doing and our view around this.
And if family wants to go and visit an Alpha school to see if it's right for them, is that a possibility?
It absolutely is. In fact, that's kind of the key is students will come and do a shadow day to see if the school is a fit. And the one thing we warn parents is don't send your kid to a shadow day unless you are convinced that you want to move, or your kids will rebel. They'll be like, I'm not going back to my old school. I want to go to this new school. And so that's one of the things we say. But yeah, we're hosting... We're hosting info sessions at all of these schools and getting kids in to kind of experience this. And again, that whole idea of love of school, it is so magical because when kids love school, it allows us to help them unlock their potential and do big things.
Amazing.
Well, I got to say, I came into this podcast saying, well, I always learn something, but how big a deal can it be? And I'm coming out of it saying this is so inevitable and so huge. This has been great.
Yeah, and critical for America, critical for the world. I mean, the speed of change is so extraordinarily fast that if we are still using the old methodologies, we're hitting brick walls. We need some, not just Alpha School, hopefully many different mechanisms that are going to enable us to have our kids, our college kids, and even we didn't talk about it, but reskilling. Using this technology to reskill our employees is going to be fundamentally critical. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it.
A pleasure. DP2, awesome. Salim, a pleasure as always.
I want to attend the school.
Absolutely.
Yeah, reskill yourself.
All right, guys. Have a beautiful day. Thank you. If you made it to the end of this episode, which you obviously did, I consider you a moonshot mate. Every week, my moonshot mates and I spend a lot of energy and time to really deliver you the news that matters. If you're a subscriber, thank you. If you're not a subscriber yet, please consider subscribing so you get the news as it comes out. I also want to invite you to join me on my weekly newsletter called Metatrends. I have a research team. You may not know this, but we spend the entire week looking at the metatrends that are impacting your family, your company, your industry, your nation. And I put this into a 2-minute read every week. If you'd like to get access to the Metatrends newsletter every week, go to diamandis.com/metatrends. That's diamandis.com/metatrends. Thank you again for joining us today. It's a blast for us to put this together every week.
In 2021, a hacker uncovered a fatal weakness in the world's most important operating system.
What would you do with a key that gets you into any server on the internet? Is this live to the public right now?
Yeah, it's live on the server.
Look, I'm not pleased. I would like you to change it back.
At the time, just about everyone believed that hacking the system